Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and with us for this particular segment is Simon Cataldo, who is running in the Democratic primary on September 6th for a state representative seat, which is the 14th Middlesex District, okay? And just to acclimate the viewers, we'll just take a second. The 14th Middlesex District consists of the entire town of Carlisle, and 5 precincts in Chelmsford, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 4 precincts in Acton, 1, 2, 6, and 7, and 3 precincts in Concord, 1, 2, and 5. So that's a pretty good geographic area. We have a population of a little over 45,000 people in that area, and it contains elements of the district that was formerly occupied by Tammy Gouveia. She's the representative. So we've had a redistricting as a result of the 2020 census. The representative districts and the senatorial districts in the state have been redrawn, and here we are. So that's the situation that Simon is attempting to become the representative. And if you'll just give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll start the question and answer.
Sam, thanks so much. You have a lot of fans among my family and friends and supporters, so people were so excited when I was on here with you last time. And
we had a good show.
Very excited that I was coming back on, so I'm really, really happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited for the conversation. My name's Simon Cataldo. I'm a Democrat who's running for state representative in the 14th Middlesex District. You just did a great job of describing the district as it is now. It's changed a bit. I grew up in West Concord. I'm a former special education math teacher. I started a national nonprofit for at-risk youth called Harlem Lacrosse and built that from scratch in my early 20s to what it is now, which is a over $8 million organization fully employing over 60 full-time employees. And we've served over 3,000 students who have earned over $70 million in academic scholarships. I later went to law school, clerked for an Obama appointee on the Court of Appeals in the federal courts, and then served as a U.S. Justice Department trial attorney in a small public corruption section where I prosecuted Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Arizona, a high-ranking Veterans Affairs official for a bribery scheme, and a judge in Arkansas. And I'm running because I think that we need great representation in the government. Elections have consequences right now, especially on the local and state level. We have a lot of important needs in our district that I know we're going to discuss today. And we need great representation. We need somebody who can navigate the state legislature, who can be a strong advocate for our community and our many needs. And I'm hoping to be that person for us.
Well, I think you've encapsulated your goals and aspirations, and certainly you're coming, just in my opinion, I think you're coming from the right place, and you have the right focus and outlook for, in essence, what a state representative should be, okay? And largely locally focused, not to say that the larger state and maybe overlapping into some federal issues have some influence in the way you look at things, you know, because we're not an island, obviously. But that's great. And I want to make folks aware that you have really conducted tremendous outreach over the past several months. And in the last 3 weeks, we've received 3 pieces of literature, campaign literature at our house. And Jack, if we can just focus in here on the table, just to give folks an example of what they may see in terms of mailings, if we can get the camera on this piece here. We have a large flyer from Simon, and basically introducing himself just the way he has done and highlighting some of the high-level issues that he's just talked about. We have another flyer here, and these were mailers. I think this one was sent to my wife. Oh, that's good. That's fine. She's a fan, by the way. So, and here's another one, and I believe that's a shot of downtown West Concord. At least that's what it looks like to me. So Simon is nodding his head, so that's
And do you know, Sam, because I don't know if all your viewers know, that you used to live in Concord?
I did. Yes, I did. I grew up in the town of Concord, and I was there from ages 1 through 18, basically, and I am very familiar with the area. It is not the same town as when I grew up, because we're talking 1950s and early 1960s, okay, so that's quite a change, but all the suburban communities have changed. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, Concord was a farming town, basically, and it's completely different, but anyway.
I've been telling all my friends, by the way, what you told me about what the Depot area used to be like in the 50s and 60s with the 5 different car dealerships and the bowling alley.
I'm writing a series of articles for one of the classic car magazines, and I'll send it to you, because I think you get a kick out of it. It's and it talks about that area and the fact that the car dealerships were small, but they were concentrated, and it's just, you know, it's very fascinating, I think, and I've had a good reaction to that. So thank you for that little plug. Okay.
Well, I've been sending you a lot of mail recently,
yes, you
obviously,
have.
so I'd appreciate some back.
I will.
From
Yes,
the Chase household.
I will. We will absolutely do that. The last piece of literature we got was what I call a door handout, for lack of a better term. I don't know if there is a technical term politically for this, but again, it shows Simon's, you know, introduces himself and describes his high-level priorities and goals. So it's very good. And the folks that you have working for you are they're very personable, and it's good to have those people doing your outreach for you. I think they're probably being very well received. So that's good emissaries.
They're doing a great job. I think the ones who showed up at your door are high schoolers.
Yes.
We have high schoolers from every town in the district who have been working really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam, they give me a lot of hope for the future, because they're dynamic, they're creative, they're hardworking, they're dependable, and they've been really well received. Later today, after we take this, I'll be going out with them around Chelmsford, and it's been a privilege to do that with them.
And you're right. It's great to see young people getting involved and understanding the issues and taking a stand, you know, basically, and following up on that. So let's talk a little bit about what some of your priorities will be should you be elected. And again, these are all reflected in your campaign literature. And of course, you know, I'm going to ask you about the progressive Democrat thing, because as we talked about last time, that's probably one of my biggest issues that I have with politicians in general is the labeling and how we don't seem to be able to listen to each other and consider, you know, opposite viewpoints and so forth. It's, you know, my way or the highway type thing. And unfortunately, labels like progressive Democrat tend to put people in a particular category. And, you know, on the other side, I guess, I don't know what the comparable term would be, progressive Democrat or, you know, reactionary Republican. I don't know, but there's a term on the other side. Maybe you know what it is. But, you know, I don't like those labels, because I don't think they do much to inform the voter on how a person really feels or thinks. So I'm going to let you talk about that within that context.
So I think I've been called everything across the spectrum in terms of what a Democrat could be called: progressive, moderate. I could not agree more with what you just said. People hear these terms, whether it's progressive or conservative, and they think, not me. And that's not how we should be talking about politics. Sometimes I've been called progressive derisively, sometimes adoringly. And I think that people hear that word and they think very different things. And it's just not specific enough. It's more divisive than it is inclusive. So I don't have any problem with the word, but I think it's the obligation of the person running for office to be very specific about what they want to do in that role. And so that's what we're here to talk about.
Right.
And we need to just get beyond that. I'm not running for palace intrigue. I'm not running to push a particular ideology. I'm running for the people of the district. We have real needs. Elections have consequences. We have resource needs. We have budget needs. We have education needs. We have policy needs right here in Chelmsford, in Concord, in Acton, in Carlisle. And I'm running for the people of the district to advance our interests, both locally and on the statewide level.
I don't think that could have been said any better, and I think that should give people comfort, okay, that you're getting beyond the bitter partisan aspect of the politics. And that's entirely, and it's even more appropriate at the local level. And it seems like you have a good grasp of that. So let's talk about the issues that you've articulated in your campaign literature and in other places. And what would you say, if you had to pick one, what would be your top priority from a policy or an issue standpoint going forward?
Our district is struggling with education funding as it concerns partnership from the state. So you're very well versed in this, but just in case anyone who's watching isn't, we get funding from Chapter 70 through the state budget and occasionally from grants from the state. And when we are lacking in that area, it really puts a lot of pressure, not just on the schools, but on the town budgets. It creates pressure for our property taxes. It makes it much more difficult for the town to provide the other types of public services and basic services that the town provides. Things like our roads, our water infrastructure, our sewer infrastructure, those projects that are really, really important. In addition to other things that we do to support seniors and young families in the town. So we need to have better advocacy at the state level to support our school budgets through Chapter 70. It doesn't only affect the children and the families who are in the schools. It affects everybody because it affects the fiscal health of the town. So I want to work on that and be a strong and vigorous advocate for our communities in terms of public education. But just getting a little bit more specific, I think that we can do better in supporting special education in our communities. I think we could also do much better in supporting vocational education and expanding access to quality vocational education. We have two really excellent vocational schools that serve our district, Neshoba and Minuteman. And it is now very, very competitive to get into those schools. Sam, the problem with that is that we have a lot more people in our community who could really benefit from vocational education. And there's a workforce aspect of this right now as well. The average age of a plumber or an electrician in Massachusetts right now is in their late 50s.
That is not a good thing.
It's a very bad thing.
Yep.
And it doesn't just matter for the people who are trying to get emergency service at their house to fix something electrical in their home or to fix a toilet. And those are not to be given short shrift because those are real emergencies as well. But it also just relates to our ability as a state to build out healthy infrastructure in Massachusetts. It relates to our climate and environmental goals because we want to have this green economy. We want to have all this economic opportunity for working class people, but we don't yet have the workforce to actually achieve that. And so supporting vocational education, both in our Voc Tech schools, which are incredible, but also in our traditional public schools is something that I'd like to do in the state legislature.
Now, in terms of, and we already have the examples, the vocational situation you just mentioned, but I've always looked at Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a funny animal in terms of the way we deliver local services. And I've said this, people are sick of it probably, I'm going to say it again anyway. We have 351 little kingdoms all doing the same thing, okay? Which at the 30,000 foot seems like a very inefficient way to deliver local services, okay? So in terms of what you just talked about, education, we already have regionalization at the vocational level. But do you think there's an opportunity to achieve any kind of economies of scale through regionalizations of some of the other educational services we have? Would that be a way to streamline, make more efficient, maybe save a little money to attack some of the issues that you just mentioned?
Perhaps, but we'd really need to work that out through the budget. There'd have to be funding attached for that. One of the challenges that our local school districts experience is that they lose money per student when students leave for either a charter school or a Voc Tech school. And sometimes the the math doesn't work out in the school district's favor. And so I think that there may be opportunities for regionalization, but what we have to make sure of is that we're not putting our local school districts, who are already, and especially in the case of Chelmsford, I would say, punching above their weight in terms of academic output and quality compared to funding. We need to make sure that those schools aren't losing out as part of what attempts to be an improvement in services and efficiency.
Okay, and that's a good answer. So it indicates to me that you don't have a real set preconceived notion of how the thing ought to be done, but you're willing to explore and look for alternatives and listen to ideas, from other sources, maybe to develop a solution. And I think that's very important. I look through your priorities here, and that's what I see. I see a willingness to work with everybody and listen, okay, as opposed to trying to ram through a specific ideological agenda, which, and we can all point to politicians who operate that way, and I don't think that's the way to go.
Sam, it's my first time running for office, first time that I'm trying to enter politics. My only experience with politics before this was prosecuting the ones who had committed crimes. But in my experience as a teacher in a large public school, doing special education work, and in my experience growing a national nonprofit, which was a business essentially, and is a business in many respects, and then working within the large bureaucracy of the United States Department of Justice and in federal courts, you learn that you have to work with everyone to get anything done. And when I see the state of our politics now, it's just patently obvious to me, as I think it is to most people, that this is not the way that we're going to make government work for people when everybody is at loggerheads and taking cheap shots. And it's a simple but perhaps not easy thing to do. But I think that my perspective and my experiences will lend itself well to being a collaborator in the legislature.
Yeah, and you have as you just said, you have a record, you have a track record there that people can actually look at if they're interested to, make the judgment as to your ability and qualifications, which I think, again, you've demonstrated amply. Let's talk a little bit about what has been described as a housing crisis in the state. And I think this is something that's been looming for many, many years. When I was on the Chelmsford Select Board 16, 17 years ago, this was an issue and something that I was very concerned and interested in. So can we have your thoughts on what we call the housing crisis in Massachusetts?
Yeah, and just to take a running start on that, Sam, when we have board meetings for my nonprofit organization, we're talking about the budget. We talk about what it costs to do something, and then we talk about what it costs to not do something.
Yeah, very important.
And with housing and with transportation, as is probably most current in the news right now because there was a train that got caught on fire and people were jumping off a bridge.
Terrible.
Really scary stuff. We are experiencing what it costs us to not make certain investments. In Chelmsford, for example, we have some really important and needed public and senior housing units that have not received the support from the state financially that's been needed for just capital upkeep and improvements. So one of the things that I would be working on is to make sure that the housing that we do have now, the affordable housing, the senior housing that we have, is a place where people can live in dignity, and make sure that that continues to the highest extent possible in terms of the livability and the quality of those units. Because before we get to the point where we're talking about building new housing, we need to make sure that the housing that we have is kept up to the standards that we would all like to see and live in ourselves. So that's one, and that's a really significant part of the equation here, because if we're only talking about new housing and we're not keeping up what we already have, then we're going to make the challenge a lot more difficult for us than it already is. In terms of new housing, I think it's universally accepted that in Massachusetts, in Metro West, in the Merrimack Valley, we have a housing crisis. One of the problems is that the property taxes are so high for so many longtime homeowners, the people who have built this community and have lived here, built their homes, built the community, that they're getting priced out simply of staying in their own homes. And then they have nowhere to go. And to me, it's not just a financial and fiscal issue. It's not just a housing issue. It's an ethical and
It's a moral issue, right? Yeah, exactly.
And it's also a healthcare issue because we know, just anecdotally as well as empirically, we know that if people can stay in their community as they age, they will be healthier, they'll live longer and at a higher quality, they'll be closer to their children and their grandchildren. That's the community that we want to have and create. We don't want to have a community where it is really, really hard for people who built this place to stay here. And so I think that we need to look very closely at providing targeted property tax relief for our seniors in this community. That's something that I'd like to see, and I know it's something that's being discussed in the legislature now. I'd be working on that if I get there. In terms of the new housing, that's got to be part of the equation. We need to be selective in terms of where does it make sense to have new housing, and what opportunities may there be to increase the density within the existing buildings. For example, we have in our district a lot of old houses, big, rambling old houses. We don't need to build new $3 million houses. The large houses that we have, some of them could be subdivided and multiple families could be living in them. There's a lot of places where that's happening a lot.
You have several examples in Concord and Acton that I can think of. You know, that used to be single-family houses when I was a kid. You know, we won't say how many years ago, but now some of those have been turned into 4 families, and still quite spacious.
Yes,
I might add. So.
Carlisle as well. I've been, for my canvassing in Carlisle, I bike door to door because the houses are far apart, and so many of them have a Unit A, and it's great. People are very happy there. It's clearly enough space. It's a great starter home for young families, and we need to be looking at that as an opportunity.
And that gets you into the zoning question. So it's been proposed, you know, for many years now. I think Governor Baker was the one who initiated it years ago. His thought was we should change the rules in terms of local zoning, because right now, when you want to make a zoning change that would allow for that kind of situation, it requires a 2/3 vote by your town meeting, and that's a pretty significant hurdle. So the proposal is to make that a simple majority. So how do you feel about that? Because that's a driver. I mean, if you want to take a residential property that's single-family zoned, and you have these huge houses that could be 4 families, 2 and 4 families, to, you know, help solve the problem that we're talking about here, you've got to get the zoning changes.
Anytime we're giving our towns more dexterity to do what works for the town, I think that's a good thing. There was a scaling back to a simple majority for some zoning changes, and that was recently, and that became very relevant in Concord. There was an article that would have allowed a new affordable housing development where the Crosby's is, the Crosby's supermarket. That did not pass by a simple majority, but it became much more feasible to do that, and that.
Thank you for that update, because I that was something that I meant to check on a few months ago, and I never did. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So I think to me the bottom line is these housing issues are intensely local, and you need to build public support. So as a state legislature, we should be looking at ways to give more dexterity, more flexibility to the towns through their local processes to create the housing solutions that work there. And I think that there is a lot of political will in the towns to make more housing that works for the people who are there, or to bring in other families who want to be there.
That makes perfect sense. You sound too logical here, but that's what we want. At least that's what I'm looking for in a state representative. An extreme focus on the local constituency issues. So, just we're coming to the end of our show, but just quickly, what kinds of outreach would you do with your local officials? So we're talking about in the 4 towns that we're talking about here. It's town government, it's boards of selectmen or select boards. I don't know. Have they all changed? Did Concord change the select board from board of select?
Select board.
How about, I'm sure Carlisle did, so I'm going to guess they all did. We were probably the last ones to do it in Chelmsford, which kind of reflects the conservative viewpoint, I guess, that we have in Chelmsford for these things. But anyway, would you be in constant contact with the local officials, and would you schedule, formal times that you would meet with them, and how would you go about doing that kind of communication?
So the other day, actually this was several months ago, one of the select board members joked to me that there was a rumor that I had moved to Chelmsford.
I can understand why they would say that, because you are very visible in the...
You have to be here
Yeah.
all the time. I've got ongoing communications with members of the select board, currently members of the school committee. I'm very proud to have the endorsements of people like Donna Newcomb, John Moses, Maria Santos, who are serving so admirably, Dennis King. And I'm going to work really hard with them if I get elected. You know, one great thing that the select board does in Chelmsford is that it puts up a list of earmark requests for the state reps to work on and the state senate to work on. That's a good idea, and I'd be working hand in hand with them on that. You have to be here. You have to be talking both to town leaders and people at the doors. And so during this campaign, I'm hesitating whether it's hundreds or thousands in Chelmsford itself, but a lot of doors and talking to people about their needs. And that's how you learn about what the town needs and what can help the town from the perspective of state government. That's something that I just continue to do and work really hard. It takes a lot of time, but it's a good investment in time.
And I think that really is the essence of what you're trying to do. I mean, Tip O'Neill famously said all politics is local, okay? People are concerned about what directly affects them. It's unfortunate that folks don't see it that way. A lot of people tend not to vote in their local elections. And in the last several years, the turnout in Chelmsford has been abysmally low. I mean, we're talking between 10 and 12%, for local elections where the contests are just the local contests. So people need to understand that in Massachusetts, the local situation is where your services get delivered, okay? So if you had to make a choice, it's probably more important to vote in your local election than it would be in your state or even your federal election, okay? So people need to understand that, and you seem to understand that, and you seem to communicate that to people when you meet them. So it's very, very important for folks to have that relationship and understanding. So we are running out of time, Simon. It goes fast. Some people have asked me to extend the show for an hour, but I'm not going to do that. And I can do that because it's my show, right? So we have about a minute left, and I'd like you to take some time in the last few seconds that we do have and talk to the voters directly and essentially ask for the vote.
Thanks, Sam. We're living in a time when elections have consequences, our local elections and our state elections, as well as our national elections. As I go to door, I hear about people drinking bottled water instead of water out of the tap because of water quality issues. I hear about people having trouble getting to work and home in time to see their kids because of traffic and transportation issues. Massachusetts is in a good place to help our community, and we need great representation on the state level to make sure that our needs are met. So I am hoping to go to work for you. I'm a former special education teacher. I built a national nonprofit for education equity, and I served the United States Department of Justice as a public corruption prosecutor. Please give me your vote so that I can deliver results for our community. My name is Simon Cataldo. I'm running to be your state rep. You can learn more about me at simoncataldo.com, or you can email me at simon@simoncataldo.com. Thank you so much, and I hope to earn your vote.
And once again, thank you for appearing on the show, and we are going to see more of you before the primary on September 6th. So that's a wrap. Thank you.